Welcome to this IUN Community Garden session, Urban Places, Green Spaces. The presenter for today's session is Amanda Anderson.
Hi, everyone.
Amanda is a conservation practitioner, interpretive guide, and naturalist, and has been able to share her deep love and admiration for the natural areas in northern Indiana. While working with the Nature Conservancy for the past 4 years, Amanda has aided in the restoration of dune and swale habitat along the Grand Calumet River, participated in numerous prescribed fires, engaged in community outreach events, and much more. In her spare time, Amanda likes to explore new places, enjoy a variety of coffee drinks, share her love of music, volunteer with local organizations, and play pinball with friends. Welcome, Amanda. We're glad to have you with us today.
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be here with you all. So hello again. I know she kind of gave a brief introduction. I'll kind of go a little more into my job and what I do, but my name's Amanda Anderson. I work with the Nature Conservancy here in Indiana. We work primarily along the Grand Calumet River, doing restoration to areas that were old dune and swale habitat, which are old Lake Michigan shorelines. We work with our Indiana chapter. There's a big project that's all over the state, but kind of go a little bit more into what TNC is, what my job is, and then we'll kind of go more into what we're going to talk about today. So a little bit about me. I grew up in Northwest Indiana. I'm originally from Hammond, Indiana. I was really involved with Girl Scouts 4-H growing up. When I finished college, I actually went to school for hospitality tourism. My focus was in kinesiology and fitness, but eventually I kind of worked in the medical field for about 10 years, started taking classes at the Indiana DNR, became a naturalist, and started volunteering with a few organizations in the area, and eventually landed my job here now with TNC. More recently, I just got certified as an interpretive guide, so this is still a relatively new role for me, but a lot of my work is kind of split between doing what's called field work, where we're outside and working, in nature, and the other part of it is working in the community and doing outreach and things of that sort. So the scope of my work kind of branches into 5 sections. TNC is very focused on kind of reaching all different areas. My specific role started off originally just only solely doing what's called restoration work or field work. So this would be going to nature preserves and working on what's called invasive species. So they're plants that were introduced to the community that are not native to the area. So during the summer, we do backpack spraying. In the summer, we also do like mowing of areas, depending on where we're at, brush cutting. And in the winter time, we do restoration work that's more geared towards controlling woody species or like trees and shrubs of that sort. We also do prescribed fire. Since I've been with TNC, I've been on about a little over 20 fires between Indiana and Illinois. Given that there's some areas that I've been in that were more prairie fires, and then more urban face fires, which were like oak savannas, which are oak tree habitats that have open areas that are kind of prairie-like, and also forested areas. My job also has a leadership role aspect to it. I help lead our field crews throughout the week, and depending on the given tasks that we have going on during the week, I'm leading 3 to 5, sometimes 8 people, and we're doing various tasks that are designated throughout the week. We also are currently working on some restoration work that's doing greenhouse management, which basically is we've collected seeds from the local area of different types of like rushes or like grasses, and we're growing them in these wetland beds, eventually to put into the areas that we've been doing other restoration work to hopefully create habitat for marsh birds and other wildlife and insects and things of that sort. And then a more newer part of my role, like I mentioned before, is outreach. In the past year, I have been working in coordination with our project director and working with a lot of our partners on various things going on in the community. So here's just a few pictures of kind of what my job looks like. kind of all over the place, but we do a lot in this area. Again, like I said, we work primarily in Northwest Indiana. We work on about 13 preserves. Our preserves start in Hammond, Indiana, and go all the way almost to the lakeshore where the Indiana dunes are. And most of our preserves are in Gary, Indiana, where we work. So just a little bit about what I do. So the organization, again, I work for is the Nature Conservancy. We are a global nonprofit, originally founded in Virginia in 1951. We currently service about 79 countries. 37 of them are direct projects that TNC is the ones solely managing those projects. The other 42 countries that we help with, we work in partnership with other organizations or conservation organizations to help reach that goal. On staff, we have a little over 400 scientists that are our kind of experts in the area. And then we have a lot of staff that are in supporting roles, which is kind of what I do. And that's many, many, many more people. Our mission is to conserve lands and waters in which life depends. So we want to be sure that we're saving nature, but we also see the human aspect of it and how important that connecting nature and human beings to it is really important. And right now our current goal is working towards having more diversity, inclusion, and equity, especially in areas of urbanized areas, so that everyone can enjoy nature on some aspect. So you can see here, there's a few pictures that I had posted. These are some recent outreach programs that we've been doing. The top photo is one of our TNC people working with the Audubon. We had a group of, I think it was about 50 fourth grade class from East Chicago that came in May, and we did what was called a Grand Cal Stewardship Day. So we took them onto one of our preserves. We taught them about the river, the kids got to have like a one-on-one aspect of learning about birding or learning about the health of the river or just various different things. So just trying to like engage kids early on, get them thinking about how important engaging with nature in your community is and how close it is to them. You don't always realize that, you know, nature's not always going into a forest preserve or something. It also is what's surrounding us. The picture below it was a health and wellness day that we did with Brown Faces, Green Spaces. And we did a nature walk. And I think this one was birding, but we did a lot of other projects that day. I know we did one that was doing yoga in the park. And this was at Marquette Park in Gary. Just a really great way to engage the community. And I know they did a beach cleanup that day too, to just get people involved. And then the last picture is a picture of a festival that in our office we host every year. It's our Monarch Festival, and this will be our 6th year hosting it. And it's a really great day to enjoy the cultural aspect of the monarch butterfly and also talk about how the monarch butterfly engages with our community and nature preserves. So again, a little more information about where I work. In the late 1980s, there was an act passed that was called the Great Lakes Areas of Concern. And basically EPA looked around the Great Lakes and saw these areas that had maybe some qualities that weren't up to par for supporting the life that's around it, both people and also animals and plants and things of that sort. So they came into where our area is, where the little arrow is, and saw the Grand Calumet River being an area that had a lot of things that needed to be brought back to its original state. So this picture here was a picture taken by the Tribune in Chicago. One of the reporters in the 1960s had put his hand into the Calumet River and pulled it out, and this is what it looked like. At that time, the Calumet River was being used as a wasteland, basically, for some of the industry in the area. And they realized, like, hey, this isn't good. Like, this is people's water and ways that, you know, animals and things need to basically survive. So when the 80s came around, they passed this thing. They took a bunch of grants that were developed for this area and kind of parceled them out into different areas. So the Grand Calumet River had been broken up, and they basically gave some of the funding to IDNR, which is Indiana's DNR. And they basically were like, hey, let's try to fix these areas. So that's kind of where our project area kind of came into this bigger project. We work in what's called the Southern Lake Michigan Rim Project. And we worked with a lot of partners, like I said, Indiana DNR, Shirley Hines Land Trust, Lake County Parks. There's a lot of us that work in this area, working specifically to get the markings of what is not considered a good for the river, or what's called beneficial use impairments, back up to the standard that they should be. So the main focus of what we're doing right now is restoring these areas back to support wildlife habitat, and in direct correlation to that, be more usable for people too. So I know at this point, I think most of the marks that we're kind of at the tail end of our grant right now. Most of those marks have been brought down, but there still are some areas of the river that are still in process of being cleaned up. But for the most part, most of it is done. So what makes this area so special? Northwest Indiana is a really awesome area. We have about 10 different habitats that make up a wide range from the Illinois border almost out to the Michigan border. The most special of these is dune and swale, and that again is where I work. In the dune and swale habitat, we have about 70 species of native plant that some of are globally and significantly rare. We have about 200 species of birds. During the migration process, so that's like beginning of May, we'll see several hundreds more birds that come through that area. There's about a little over 300 that will stop there, make nesting, and then have their young and move on. We also have 14 different species of mammals, reptiles, and amphibians. I know of those, there's 8 of them that are rare species, and about 60 different species of butterfly. And right now there are about 4 that are listed as globally rare. So it's a really diverse area. We kind of meet in this weird biome of where the northern pinery in Michigan and Wisconsin come down and meet here, and we're having the hardwood forest coming up from the lower parts of the United States. So we kind of meet here in the middle, and we also have a lot of like wetland habitat and drier, like sandy areas. So we have a lot of different types of plants that a lot of places don't have. So just a little history on what exactly dune and swale is. It was created from old remnant beach shores of Lake Michigan. So about 6,000 years ago, there was a big glacier that sat over where Lake Michigan is now. And this was called the Wisconsin Glacial Formation. And basically this glacier kind of receded. And when that happened, it kind of like moved some of the sediments that are in the water into these different layers that kind of looks kind of like a ripple. So you'll see here in the 4,000 BC, not BC, BP, that the original Tolston area was created. So that is where the Tolston Beach area, Calumet Lagoon, and the starts of the Great Marsh in the Indiana Dunes. As the glacier kept receding over the next 1,000 years, we had more areas created where the little Calumet River got developed, and the Grand Calumet River. And then we start seeing development of the big dunes that we see at the Indiana Dunes. And that went all the way until most of these little areas. So you'll see down here Lake Calumet and Wolf Lake, the Grand Calumet River fully developed, and the Little Cal, and then finally we'll have the full development of what is, sand dune in the Indiana Dunes. So the dune and swale habitat, like I mentioned, basically when they reseeded, it created this bump up, and then when it reseeded, it created like a lowland kind of wetland. And then when it moved in again, it created another dune, and it kept doing this. And basically kind of looks like a corrugated like cardboard or like a potato chip, kind of that kind of structure. And it's really interesting to see because this also created these really interesting habitats. It's a very unique. They're really only found around the Great Lakes, most of it being in Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And Indiana had one of the most rarest areas of that, about 9,000 acres previously. Unfortunately, because of people moving in and industrialization and residential neighborhoods being brought in, only about 900 acres of that still remains today. So we can see here a aerial view of this, and we look back at Gary for a snapshot, kind of where we work in the 1930s. This is before most of the steel mills or any of that really have been like fully developed, and the airport wasn't there or anything. So for reference, this road here is Klein Avenue. This is Fifth Avenue or Route 20 going through Gary, and this is the toll road running through here. And you can see all these little lines kind of lining in between, and that is all dune and swale habitat, old Lake Michigan shorelines. So over the years, Gary got industrialized to basically support the people that were living there. They created neighborhoods and businesses and all this other infrastructure that was brought in and made it urbanized. And so looking at 1996, which is pretty close to what it looks like today, you can see where that dune and swale that once was there is now only in these small sections. And even in these sections that were there, most of them are pretty much still intact, dune and swale, but there are some signs of showing that it would have been developed. Here, up here, this preserve is called Pine Station, and there's areas of it that were mined for sand that was basically used for helping buildings create other infrastructure and things of that sort. If you go down here to the Ivanhoe neighborhood, you can actually see old road beds that were being ready to be developed and got halted. Basically, when the steel mill around the 70s kind of had that turn of how they were doing things there and kind of had the reduced needing for staffing, a lot of people unfortunately moved out of this area to other areas where there was jobs and things. And so those areas never got developed. So fortunately, like, we still have these dune swales still there and present. So when talking about that, we have to think about what it was before and what human impacts have on nature and what urbanization can also impact nature. So thinking of human impacts. So when we look at what Gary would have looked like back in the 1930s, there would have been a lot of timber logging for building homes, creating fuel for things that they're doing, creating other goods needs for that area. There was a lot of home and industrial development. So a lot of the land was, dug up, filled in, and basically used for what was needed for supporting Gary at that time. And not so much in Gary, but in the surrounding area. Another thought is, there's areas where there's nature, but agriculture also is a disruption to an ecosystem. And maybe not in Gary, but like adjacent communities to Gary have remnants of agriculture, which create these kind of broken tree lines here and fill in with food and things that people need, but they also do disrupt the ecosystem. With that also comes forest succession, which is basically a change in how an ecosystem is. A lot of things rely on fire and different sorts of resources to be sustainable. And when you're kind of pulling those communities apart, they have a harder time being able to be sustainable in the long run. With fire suppression, that's been something that's been a topic in urban communities of, is fire necessary? And it's been kind of something that's been ongoing. I mean, there's wildfires that happen out west and in Canada right now or things. And then a lot of times with not having fire in our ecosystem, it kind of creates more of a hindrance to keeping the ecosystem the way it's supposed to be, and also keeping people safe. So back in the 1950s, Smokey the Bear, I'm sure people are familiar with, was introduced, and basically the idea of, fire's bad and fire shouldn't happen. And so land management kind of took a change. And so where fire would have been introduced previously, it's now being suppressed. And basically the forest and the areas around it are allowed to have non-native species come into the understory and kind of create more fuels. Small, fast-growing trees come in there, and they're not, and fire helps suppress those, but since there's no fire, those are able to do. And then there's this like kind of intertwining of all the different fuels that are there. And so with wildfires, a lot of times either can be like a lightning strike, or maybe someone's not careful with putting out a fire, or it could be something like a railroad, there's a spark off the road, and it, so happens to be in an area where it's really dry and the perfect conditions for fire, and that's how a wildfire starts. So not having that fire there is, kind of important to think about, and just think about for future. Also, so pests, which is like invasive species. So it can also be not only just plants, but it could be animals. They sometimes can come over on cargo ships and other things, and basically be introduced to an area that they're not usually susceptible to. And sometimes there's not a natural predator that can keep them in check. Sometimes fire also helps with that, but it just depends on the species. But yeah, when those get introduced, sometimes that can also create problems with keeping a habitat the way it's supposed to be. And then the last thing, kind of touched on already, but just the idea of fragmented habitats. So when you're coming into an urbanized area, you have a lot of fragmented habitats. And we'll go a little more into this. The idea of fragmented habitats is basically when the habitat is kind of cut in some sort of way, or divided, or creates some sort of obstacle for plants, animals, other species to thrive. So we'll see here in this picture the habitat originally, and A, B, and C, so these little guys here, basically rely on one another to keep the ecosystem in check. But let's just say a natural disaster comes in, or a road, or something of that sort, and basically kind of divides that habitat. So now we have species A here at the top, and species B and C, and species A needed species C maybe to be habitat for, or a home for that species, and B relies on C, and so on and so forth, and basically kind of creates this kind of like ripple effect, and basically can create problems in the long run of having more disease. Sometimes there's no they're not able to adapt properly, and so there's higher rates of death and less populations to grow. So it kind of becomes a lot more than what you actually would think it would be. And fragmented habitats also affect humans, believe it or not. So if you think about in urbanized areas, there's a lot of surfaces that are, kind of hard, like roadways, parking lots, there's building structures. They kind of change the way that the ecosystem is, right? And what happens is surface water, so like when it rains, or there's like water that, kind of flows naturally, it can't be absorbed into the ground as easily. So you'll kind of see in this picture here, here where there's vegetated areas, and the areas are relatively pretty cool because there are a lot of green areas, there's a lot of trees and things. But when you get into these urbanized areas in here, things tend to be a lot more hot on the surface, just because there is nothing to really help alleviate some of that water and things that would run off from those areas. And it tends to be a lot hotter in those areas. They kind of create these little bubbles of just like heat structures, which can affect health. I mean, It can be something that, maybe someone has issues with like, breathing or something, air quality issues, heart conditions, things of that sort. And then you get into these areas where there's urbanized areas that have more tree structures, and it starts to show like, oh, there's something there to alleviate some of the water and things that also help with cooling down an area that is inhabited by humans. So green spaces is what that's generally called in a urbanized area, help reduce those CO2s that are being built up in the atmosphere there, and also help with humans on health issues, mental health, etc. So we'll talk a little bit more about green spaces, and just a general like definition is green spaces are anywhere that has grass, trees, just some sort of vegetation. So you'll see these 3 pictures here. These are just some examples of green spaces. It could be a community garden, or it could be a little parkway. It could be an outdoor space that you have that has like foliage and, nature. It could be a variety of things. So thinking to your own neighborhood where you live, can you think of something that would be a green space in your neighborhood? So just think about that for a second and get that in your head. And we're going to use that going forward, thinking about the rest of the presentation. So now that you have that green space that you're thinking of, when you look back at the aerial view of Gary or in Northwest Indiana back in the 90s or up to today's present space, aside from the dune and swale that I pointed out to you, what do you think are examples of green spaces that would be in Gary? So the obvious example of green spaces would be a nature preserve or a forested area, somewhere that you go to and you enjoy nature for the day, and that's that. But it doesn't necessarily always have to be that typical definition of what nature should be. Nature has a lot of examples in urban situations as well. It could be parks, it could be like a garden area. There's a lot of recreational areas. I know some communities have like biking areas. They have kayaking and canoeing, maybe on a waterway. And then there's also home gardens and yards. So your yard turf and things of that sort. So thinking of connecting to nature when in an urban setting, we're going to go into each one of these kind of individually, but just kind of like in an urban setting, how can I connect myself? There's a lot of different aspects into urban conservation, but we want to go right now on the self level, because most of us want to be outside and enjoy nature and want to be able to have green spaces that we can go to. So the obvious is visiting a local green space. You can create a home garden. You can use phone apps, joining a community garden, volunteering with a local conservation group, or there's also a concept called forest bathing. Like I said, we'll get into each one of these individually. So visiting a green space, actually, there's a lot more resources out there that you would actually, more than you actually realize, that offer opportunities to be engaged in your community and engaged in nature. A lot of times it just takes doing a little bit of research to just know what's available in your community. A lot of towns or cities, parks departments host a variety of events or give locations of where that they have parks or available recreational places or resources that are there. There are online communities that can help direct you to areas that maybe be in your immediate area, but also maybe outside of where you live. I know like on Facebook, they have, you can put in what neighborhood you live in, or what town you live in. And sometimes they'll have like a town, going on, and then people will post things there kind of like in a community forum. Libraries are another really great place to have resources. They kind of have some of the what's going on in the neighbor areas, and maybe have something also going on in their own facility. The good old asking a friend, word of mouth is a great way, and being like, hey, I went to this park and it was really great and you should go there too. Or, just kind of, talking and getting to know what other people enjoy too. And then of course, Google searching, can't stress it enough. I use it all the time. It's kind of the tried and old true nowadays, of using the internet as a resource. A lot of times you'll find things that you didn't even know existed. So it's just kind of knowing where to look and where to get started. And this would be great, some suggestions of places where to go. And a lot of times they'll have a lot of community events that will also introduce you to like other people that also have similar interest. So if you're wanting to create a home garden, it doesn't necessarily have to be a big full-on backyard garden. It could be porch planters. It could be having raised flower beds. It could be a variety of things, but there's a lot of options out there to help you get started and fulfill those needs if you're wanting to do that. Again, kind of reiterating, cities and towns, they have a lot of park departments that may have resources for free plant giveaways or know of native plant sales or other kinds of plant sales that are going on. Again, online communities are another really great resource of, you can join ones that do like plant swapping, and there's all kinds of stuff out there. Again, libraries, they also facilitate a lot of resources for getting involved in the community and also learning about what's going on in your community. So definitely suggest that. And native plant sales, there's a few that are in this area. I know Wild Ones and Gibson Woods does a plant sale every year, the Friends of the Indiana Dunes. There's a few in this area that offer, if you're wanting to go the native plant route, to have a garden. And then gardening clubs, there's a lot of options out there for that. And then of course, using Google as a resource, and you could type in like, I want to start a garden or whatever, and it will give you a bajillion links to help you get started. But if you're wanting, something a little more tailored, maybe rather than going to Google, you can go to one of these other resources that maybe would be able to tailor it more to what you're wanting. So believe it or not, technology is a really big part in our urban interface of what we do, even in my own job, of just connecting to nature. Just being familiar with what resources are actually right here in the palm of your hand. We use a lot of the times iNaturalist or Seek, which is these two apps up here. And basically, so say you're outside and you see a plant and you're like, oh, what is that? I'm not sure what that is. You can snap a picture of it and upload it to an app. And basically, it'll help you kind of figure out what that plant is and kind of give some more information. And then it also has a link there that will take you to internet sources that more than you probably ever need, but a lot of resources out there that really could help you with understanding like what it is you're seeing. Another one that I use pretty regularly, and I've used when I've gone to areas even where I work, is using All Trails. And this is a really great app to kind of give you an idea of what trails or open areas for people to go through and walk, or just enjoy nature. You can type in a community, like here I put in Gary, and it pulls up all the trails that are listed in Gary that you could enjoy. And then depending, I believe there's a free version of it. You could upgrade it. Oops, sorry. You could upgrade it to another version, but it's not necessary. All of these apps are free and available to use, so I would highly suggest using them. And then again, going back to using online communities, again, if you take a picture and maybe these apps aren't giving you the answer that you're wanting, you can go to an online forum and being like, hey, what is this? And they'll help you. And social media also is another really great way of kind of just seeing where other people enjoy nature in your community, and also just kind of helping you bridge that gap. Maybe you might meet someone that you enjoy talking to on there, and then you say, hey, can we meet up in the community, and kind of making it more of a social thing too. So there's a lot of awesome resources there. So I know we kind of touched on home gardening, but joining a community garden. So maybe you don't have the capacity in your home to have a garden. You can join into what's called a community garden, and basically it's an open garden for the community to enjoy. A lot of towns, parks, offer these. There are some online community groups that you can go to and find out where maybe a community garden exists in your neighborhood. Libraries may have some options of community gardens. And I know a lot of schools and colleges nowadays also offer community gardens. When we were living in Chicago, my son's school had a community garden that they did gardening as part of their class, and then opened it up to the neighborhood and allowed people to come and take, if they wanted a tomato or whatever, so it's a really great way not only to be involved in nature, but also kind of have that teamwork element, and also just to get to know other people that also may be interested in the same similar things. There are some other organizations that focus just solely on gardening if you're interested. So like I mentioned before, Wild Ones, the Gibson Wood chapter, it's out of Gibson Woods in Hammond, Indiana. They do all kinds of gardening events, and they also do a native plant sale. If you really wanted to go the extra mile, there is a Master Gardener's certification through Purdue's Extension that, if you really want to get into it, that's something you can do too. And of course, the good old Google is, if you're just wanting to see what's going on, maybe you're not finding what you need in the town park or whatever, you can go on Google. I know right now, Miller Beach has a gardening club over there in that area, and they have online all of their resources of when they're doing things and how to get involved. So it's a really great option. Okay, so the last thing that you could do also, if you're maybe that's not your niche of doing gardening or technology or something, you could get involved with a conservation group in your area. And these are just a listing of some of the organizations that exist in Northwest Indiana. There's a lot. We all kind of in some way, shape, or form work in partnership with each other, doing a variety of different tasks, outreach events, all kinds of stuff. Like I said, we do an event in East Chicago every year, and we work with all of these partners to help put on this event. I know we went and did a event with Brown Spaces, Green Faces, where we did a wellness health day and how to get, be healthy in nature. So there's a lot of options to get involved there if that is an interest of yours. And it could be something as simple as, they ask you to go walk a trail and just give an update on how the trail looks. It could be they need help collecting seeds in a native plant area. It could be doing what's called citizen science projects. So basically you would help with collecting data on a specific species and kind of report back to a bigger organization. And that helps monitor plant populations, insect populations, and so on. So there's a lot of ways to get involved there. So now we've kind of gone through a lot of the really oh man, that's that's a lot to do in a small area, more than you were thinking, Gary. But let's just take a step back and kind of regroup. So let's just say your schedule's super busy. You don't have a lot of time to get devoted to these other things, but you really still want to enjoy the benefits of nature. Let's think of this topic of called forest bathing. Basically, it is a practice of immersing yourself in nature and just being engaged with your senses. You don't need to go into a nature preserve to do this. You don't need nature in its traditional settings. You can do this just stepping outside of your house. So it's just basically creating this bond of what you're seeing outside and just admiring nature for what it is, thinking about what it means to you, how it makes you feel emotionally, physically, mentally, and then kind of also just being able to say oh, I went outside today and this feels really good. So we'll do a little practice run of what forest bathing is. So let's go back to that green space that we kind of talked about earlier in your neighborhood. So let's think. For me, my green space I can think of would be my backyard garden that I grew in Chicago. Before we moved to our apartment in Chicago, we had kind of a big slab of concrete back there. We got the okay from our landlord to, with their permission, create a garden back there and make it something that's kind of a safe haven. So think of your green space and what that would be for you. If you want to use mine, that's fine too. So looking at this green space, or what you would imagine your green space to be, what do you think colors you would see? What shapes are you seeing? Are the flowers kind of elongated? Are they open? Are they closed still? Are the leaves big and open? Are they different shades of green? Just kind of thinking about what those colors are. Now, when you're there, what are you smelling? Some of these flowers are very fragrant. They have a lot of scent to it. Some of them not so much. Maybe if you rub against the flower or the stem, does it have a fragrance? Like mint plants have that smell. And if you touch it, like, how would it feel? Is it hairy? Is it smooth? There's there rough edges? Kind of, what does it make you feel if you touch that thing? What does it make you feel? Then take a moment, admiring those things, and then close your eyes, take a slow breath, and just be present with the senses that you just connected with. And it doesn't really have to be such a big thing. You start noticing when you reflect on maybe just that one plant you're seeing outside, that, oh, like I'm feeling a little less, distracted, or a little more calm, or, are feeling kind of a little more at ease. And like I said, it's just something you can do with just going outside and just kind of having almost like a meditative type thing with nature. And it can be done in any kind of setting. It can be done in an urban setting. It can be done in a forest, or however you'd like to do it. So what's the big takeaway we can get from all of this? That Northwest Indiana is an ever-changing and continues to evolve area. We've seen how it was, pre-industrialization to what it is now, and we still have people that are working on these areas now. We are hoping to continue to evolve. I know that there's been projects that have been trying to get more involved with the community, taking areas that maybe are in disrepair and bringing them back to their glory. I know right now Audubon's working on a project at Hatcher Park and trying to make that more at Hatcher Park in Gary, and making that more accessible to the neighborhood, and hopes to eventually maybe make that into some sort of recreational area for people. On one of our preserves in Hammond, we are looking at actually putting a bike trail through our preserve so that people can enjoy nature, that it doesn't have to be such a disconnect. And like I said, like, urban conservation has many, many levels. Right today, we only just talked about the individual experience of urban conservation, but there are a lot of other levels with, sustainability, being more proactive with power use and things of that sort. So it's an individual experience, and definitely something that, opens a bigger door for a lot of people, and just thinking about how we as a person are impacted not only by nature, but what our impacts are on nature itself. And then the last point is just green spaces are everywhere. You don't have to go to a nature preserve or forested area to enjoy nature. The very best part about it is, because green spaces are everywhere, you get to enjoy the benefits of green spaces. It's not only good for your health and well-being, but it also helps wildlife. When you think about, oh, like, if I have a garden, I'm impacting, the insects in this area, or other things that maybe need those plants or things to survive. So it's kind of rewarding and kind of just a giving process. So if you're wanting to learn more about what we do here in the Nature Conservancy in Indiana, kind of give a little guide here. If you search nature.org, and you can go into the Indiana chapter, and you can go on our website there and see all the happenings we have going on in our state. If you choose to want to get involved, there's a little drop down here. That'll show where you can volunteer if you so choose, attend events that are up and coming, just all different resources there. And we also are very involved on social media, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. There's a variety of different ways to get involved. And just something that's coming up for us, like I mentioned previously, we do a festival for the monarch butterfly every year. This year it's going to be in September on the, it's a Saturday generally. And it's an event that we, again, host with all the partners that we have in Northwest Indiana, Shirley Hines, the Dunes. We've had the Field Museum come out and help us with this. And we do a monarch butterfly release. This year, we're doing the stages of the monarch butterfly and kind of talking about its life cycle. So that's something we're planning right now. And if you're interested in learning more, this is the information, or we have a Facebook page, which is Festival de la Monarca, that you can find and follow, have more updates and more information about it. And then lastly, if you're wanting to, go to one of the areas that we are currently working on in dune and swale habitat, you can visit these urban preserves that are scattered kind of all over the lower Lake Michigan area. Miller Woods is in Gary. It is part of the National Park Service, and they have dune and swale habitat that is open to the public. It's kind of almost by the Miller Beach area. They have a nature center, Douglas Center, that just reopened. That's a really great place to take kids and just kind of get them more thinking about, nature and stuff. We also work on Ivanhoe Nature Preserve, Seidner, and Gibson Woods. These are all in our current project area. So you can come out and just see some of the work that we're working on, get a little more familiar about, what dune and swale looks like. It's a really cool habitat. I really highly suggest it. And if you're on the Illinois border, there actually is a nature preserve, Sand Ridge Nature Preserve, over in Calumet City, that also has dune and swale habitat. They have a really awesome nature preserve there, or sorry, nature center there that's open for kids, and definitely something I would suggest checking out if you're able. So I want to just say thank you all for your time. And if you have any questions about anything I discussed today, I'll definitely open that up for you all, but thank you.
Thank you for that, Amanda. I do have a question in chat for you. The question is, what is swale?
Swale. Okay, so a swale is basically when Lake Michigan was the glacier on the lake was being receding. Basically, areas of sediment basically got pushed up, and that created those dune ridges. And the underlying low area here is called a swale, and basically it is a marsh habitat, kind of like pondy, kind of marshy wetland that basically will have different species of like plant life. There's like lily pads, there's like different types of like hard rushes, like different types of grasses and things of that sort. So it's just like a different type of habitat, but the actual ridge part will be more sandy dune part, and that'll have more like prairie-like plants, oak trees, things of that sort. So I hope that kind of clears that up.
Thank you, Amanda. Another participant has a question. This one is about invasive animals. They say that the only ones they have heard about are coyotes and would like to know if there are any others.
So right now, I mean, there's a few. So animals can kind of be in a broad spectrum. I don't think coyotes right now are considered invasive species for us right now, but like there's a lot of insects that are invasive. So there's been introductions of like Chinese prairie mantis that will outcompete our native prairie mantis. There's actually a bug that just came over from Asia, maybe in the past couple of years. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called the lanternfly. That'll come in and it'll disrupt the ecosystem. It loves to kind of like drill into like a plant and suck all of its nutrients out. So it kind of becomes like a bigger problem. So a lot of them are more on the insect side, but there are a few that are like smaller amphibians and things of that sort. And a lot of it comes over from like commerce and things of that sort.
Again, thank you, Amanda, for the presentation and teaching us about urban places and green spaces.
Yeah, thank you everyone for having me, and I hope to see you all again in the future.